crowned by the sea. Nyra drifted through a cathedral of living coral, jeweled spires illuminated by drifting lanternfish. Every shell-inlaid pillar gleamed with pearls, and schools of silver fry spiraled overhead like confetti. It should have been a scene of triumph. Her father's court united in rare celebration. Yet the current that carried her silk fins also tugged at an unease that knotted just beneath her ribs. King Thandros lifted his scepter, voice resonant enough to rattle the conch chandeliers. Loyal subjects, witness the pact that ends an age of bloodshed. Princess Nyra, daughter of Abyssia, shall wed Prince Valen of Tideborn at the next full tide. Let our realms be bound in peace. Applause rose like breaking surf, but Nyra heard it as distant thunder. She moved beside her father with a practiced smile, feeling each approving gaze press heavier upon her shoulders. At the far end of the throne hall, the tide gates parted, and Prince Valen swept in on the crest of a royal escort. His bronze armor shimmered, every scaled plate carved with the sigil of a storm serpent devouring the moon. Eyes the color of pale ice searched the chamber until they claimed her. He bowed, courteous to the last polished gesture, but the intensity behind his downward tilt made her gills tighten. When he took her hand, his fingers were cool, almost clinical. "Our alliance will make history," he murmured, his breath stirring the pearls at her throat. "I anticipate our future with relish." "Then you relish a cage," she answered softly, "one built of protocol and convenience." Valen's smile never slipped. Cages are tolerable when they sit upon thrones. Ceremony pushed them into a slow-turning dance across the mosaic floor. Lutefish plucked crystalline arpeggios while courtiers sighed at their poised silhouettes. Nyra's tail flicked with perfect cadence, but her mind raced elsewhere, beyond courtly walls toward the midnight surface that had always whispered of freedom. When the final chord faded, King Thandros approached, trident tapping stone. "You did well, daughter. Duty honors the blood that birthed you." "Does that blood not also carry longing?" she asked. "Mother yearned for the open currents. You told me so." "Your mother chose loyalty over whim," he said, though his gaze softened at her mention. "Do likewise, and the sea will remember your sacrifice." Valen inclined his head. "If your highness allows, I wish to escort my future bride to the Chamber of Sapphires to speak privately." The king consented. Valen guided Nyra away, guard spears glimmering in their wake. In the quieter cloister, murals of past queens watched with solemn eyes. Valen traced a painted crown with deliberate fingers. "Unity requires firmness," he said. "Our kingdoms trust us to subdue centuries of rivalry. Any deviations from protocol might unravel more than your personal fate." "You speak as though I were already disobedient." "A precaution," he replied. "Rumors tell of your fascination with the forbidden surface. Such curiosities could erode confidence in the treaty. I advise restraint for your own security." Her pulse fluttered. "Is that a threat, Prince?" "A promise of vigilance," he said, then offered a courteous bow and departed, cloak swirling like black ink in water. Alone, Nyra pressed a palm to the wall. Beyond the stone, she imagined the surface world gleaming beneath moonlight. The longing returned, sharp as a fin edge. Elira, Nyra's childhood companion and lady-in-waiting, waited outside her royal chamber later that night, red curls floating weightless. "He looks at you as though you were territory, not heart," Elira whispered while brushing Nyra's hair with a comb carved from starfish bone. "Territory is all I've ever been," Nyra said. "But I feel something shifting inside me, like tide against anchor." Elira paused. "If the surface still calls, bring me with you, I can keep watch." Nyra's reflection shimmered in a shell mirror, amber eyes bright with hidden fire. "Tonight I need solitude. Only then will I understand what this urge truly means." Under the guise of a moonless patrol, she slipped past dozing sentries, ascending through the kelp forests where bioluminescent shrimp scattered like sparks. Breaking into cooler strata, she breached the surface just beyond a crescent bay. She had left the water countless times as a child, brief clandestine visits to taste rain on her lips, but never so far from safety. The salt wind laced her hair, carrying a distant rumble. Storm clouds gorged themselves against the horizon, moonlight fractured behind them. On the swells, a lone ship battled towering waves, its sails little more than shredded ghosts. Lightning split the night, revealing figures scrambling across the deck. When the mainmast cracked, a man was hurled overboard, vanishing into churning dark. Instinct overruled caution. Nyra dove. The world became roar and foam. She sliced through currents, tail thrumming with urgency. There, arms flailing, lungs expelling precious air bubbles, drifted the sailor. He looked deceptively fragile beneath the water's weight, dark hair fanning like ink, eyes shut tight. Nyra hooked an arm around his torso and kicked upward. They breached amid rain-lashed chaos. She conjured an undercurrent, ancient magic whispered by her mother, to propel them toward a sliver of shore where jagged rocks framed a narrow patch of sand. Waves pounded them onto wet gravel. Nyra hauled him clear, water coursing off scales that shimmered emerald in stray flashes of lightning. The man coughed, rolled, and groaned. His lashes fluttered, revealing eyes the color of storm-lit slate. "Easy," she said, voice trembling for more than effort. "Breathe." "You." He choked on seawater, then stared. Even through pain, amazement widened his gaze. "I must be dead. Angels don't have tails. You're very alive, and I'm no angel." Nyra checked him for wounds. A gash bled along his collarbone. She touched it, channeling faint healing warmth. The cut knitted slightly. He watched, awestruck. "Who are you?" She caught herself. "A friend. Rest now, Captain." "Captain?" He laughed weakly. "Elias Gray. How do you know me?" "The sea knows many names." She glanced at the black outline of the ruined ship. Sirens of alarm echoed from surviving sailors scrambling into boats. If they found her here, panic would follow, and war should news reach Abyssia. She rose, tail curling beneath her. "Stay clear of the tides for a while." "Wait." He grasped her wrist. Warmth shot up her arm at the contact. "Your eyes, they look like sunrise through water. I won't harm your secret." The sincerity in his voice unsettled her more than threat. "I cannot stay," she whispered, "but I will return." A final wave washed around her and she slid back, form merging with foam. Elias pushed himself upright, rain plastering hair to his brow, staring into the sea as though the water itself had stolen something vital. Nyra plunged into familiar darkness, heart pounding louder than the current. She had saved a human, committed treason in the eyes of Abyssia, and yet every cell in her body sang with exhilaration. She glided homeward, slipping past kelp sentries. In the solitude of her chamber, she hovered before her mother's old tapestry, a depiction of a mermaid queen raising starfire to calm a raging sea. Her mother had once said, "True power is the courage to choose your own course." Nyra's palm tingled where Elias had held her. Sleep came fitful, filled with fragmented dreams. Elias reaching for her through a veil of foam, Valen's pale eyes watching from shadowed reefs, her father's trident splitting the surface sky. She awoke to the distant clang of trumpet shells summoning court. The grand hall thrummed with tension. Prince Valen stood beside King Thandros, his expression a polished mask. Courtiers whispered, flicking anxious glances at Nyra as she approached. "Daughter," the king called, tone edged. "A tideborne scouting vessel sighted a human shipwreck near our borders at midnight. They reported strange currents aiding survivors to shore. Do you know anything of this?" Every gaze sharpened. Nyra felt the weight of truth pressing against her ribs. She kept her voice even. "The surface storms can be unpredictable. Perhaps the currents were mercy tonight. Valen's lips curved. Mercy is rare from the sea, yet tideborne scouts claim they glimpsed a luminous figure in the water, emerald scales, silver hair. A myth, perhaps, or a disobedient princess. Gasps rippled through onlookers. Nyra's pulse hammered. I patrolled near the maelstrom trenches. I did not approach the surface. Valen leaned closer, voice low enough only she could hear. If you cherish freedom, remain within boundaries. My patience with rumors is limited. Anger flared, but she quelled it behind a regal smile. Boundaries are like glass, transparent until broken. He straightened, eyes narrowing, yet before he could retort, the king raised a hand. Enough. Preparations for the betrothal proceed at dawn. Let none forget what is at stake. Court dispersed. Illyra drifted to Nyra's side. Hushed. Did you truly save a human? Nyra exhaled. Yes, and I fear I cannot stay away. Then let me shield you, Illyra said, loyalty shining fierce. We'll craft excuses, misdirection. But be careful. Valen's network reaches even the darkest crevices. Nyra's resolve hardened like cooling obsidian. She would see Elias again, for reasons beyond defiance. Somewhere between the crash of waves and his whispered name, destiny had shifted. She felt it in the way tides pulled heavier at her soul, calling her toward horizons no royal decree could dam. That night she slipped from her chamber once more, heart steady despite the risk. As she rose through shimmering columns of moonlight, one thought carried her faster than any current. I have tasted choice, and I will not surrender it. She broke the surface beneath a quiet sky. The storm cleared to reveal starlight strewn like luminous pearls. On the distant beach, a small fire glowed. Elias's silhouette framed against its warmth. As though he waited for a legend he refused to let fade. Nyra hesitated at the threshold of water and air, pulse echoing in her ears. With a soft breath, she began to swim toward that solitary flame, unaware that eyes far below tracked her every move, and that the first threads of war had already begun to weave through the deep. Nyra hovered in the shallows, crimson gold embers flickering across Elias's face. He crouched beside the small driftwood fire, left arm bound in a makeshift sling, yet his posture was alert, expectant. When her head broke the surface, water lapping around his boots, relief carved deep lines away from his eyes. You came back, he said, voice rough with salt and disbelief. I said I would. She swam closer, letting the moon reveal the emerald shimmer of her tail. Your wound? Healing thanks to whatever magic you breathed into me. The villagers think I'm blessed by a sea spirit. He managed a crooked grin. They aren't entirely wrong. She laid her arms on a smooth rock, tail curling beneath. The sea is more complicated than blessings and curses. So is the land, he murmured. Sit with me if that's allowed. He touched the sand beside him. Nyra hesitated. To leave the water was to invite weakness. A mermaid's power bled away on land, but the vulnerability of separation felt sharper. She pushed herself onto the rock, cool night air brushing scales that swiftly morphed into legs beneath a ripple of light. Pain accompanied the transformation, 1,000 needles under her skin, but she stifled the hiss. Every time I saw storms at sea, Elias said, steadying her elbow, I thought the ocean a beast to battle. Tonight it feels like a doorway. Nyra drew her borrowed cloak tighter. Doorways go both ways. My world is not gentle. He studied her, eyes tracing the silver web of saltwater still clinging to her hair. I don't even know your name. She considered the risk. Nyra. Nyra, he repeated, soft as if tasting its shape. I owe you my life. You owe me caution. If the Abyssian court learns of this meeting, both realms could bleed. Elias poked the fire with a stick. Funny thing, fate doesn't ask permission. Since the wreck I've been dreaming of a great coral city, voices calling me bloodbound. Her pulse quickened. What do you know of bloodbinding? Only whispers. My grandmother spoke of a forgotten pledge, humans and merfolk allied to guard something called the tidal heart. Sounded like a fairy tale. Nyra's breath caught. The tidal heart was a myth even the court archivists debated. She recalled lines from her mother's lullabies, verses about a jewel that balanced seas and skies. Elias watched her reaction. You've heard of it. It is legend, she said, though uncertainty tinged her voice. He leaned closer, heat of the fire mingling with the warmth of his skin. Legends root in truth. And if that truth links us, maybe these currents pulled us together for a reason. Their gazes locked, night air humming with unspoken gravity. Before the moment could deepen, a pulse of dread washed over Nyra. She whirled toward the sea. Currents whispered alarm. Shadows shifted beyond the surf, sleek shapes circling. Valen's sentries, she breathed, and were exposed. Elias stood drawing a weather-worn dagger. Let them come. You don't understand, they wield current steel spears that slice water and flesh the same. Nyra stepped back, calling to the tide within her veins. Get behind me. 3 merfolk emerged, armor gleaming darkly. Their leader, a lithe woman with obsidian eyes, leveled a spear. Princess Nyra, by decree of Prince Valen, you are ordered to return to Abyssia. The surface is forbidden. Nyra straightened. Tell Valen I'll return under my own will, not his yoke. The prince questions your will. The guard's gaze flicked to Elias, especially when sullied by surface vermin. Elias bristled, but Nyra seized his arm. Go back to the village. Now. I'm not leaving you. The guard advanced. Princess, choose obedience or chains. Magic surged inside Nyra, sparked by fear and fury. She lifted a hand. Seawater rose in a twisting column, hardening into glassy ice that cracked like thunder against the guard's spear, snapping it in two. The guard staggered, and Nyra hissed, I choose the sea, not your prince. With a hiss of breaking currents, 2 more spears shot forward. Nyra deflected one with a wave shield. The other grazed her shoulder, searing hot pain through flesh. Blood shimmered in moonlight. Elias lunged, dagger flashing, slashing the third guard's arm. Shock crossed the mere woman's face at the human's speed. Run! Nyra cried, pushing Elias toward the dunes. She dived, tail blossoming, drawing the guard's pursuit into the deeper dark. Currents blurred, spear points sliced past. She wove between kelp towers, lure clam light casting mosaic shadows. One guard closed in. Nyra twirled, hex glyphs flaring around her wrist, and sent a pulse of pressurized water that hurled him into a basalt column. But the leader caught her by the hair, yanking her close. Your defiance will drown kingdoms. Nyra summoned a starburst of bioluminescent algae that exploded into blinding light. The grip loosened. She surged upward and collided with a net of shimmering cords. Current steel lattice tightened, draining her magic. Valen's snare. Panic constricted her chest as the sentries dragged the net toward a dark silhouette, a submersible chariot driven by storm eels. She fought, but the cords burned, siphoning energy. Far above, the surface glittered beyond reach. Elias. She prayed he'd escaped. The chariot sped through trenches to tideborne territory, to a fortress carved within a hollowed leviathan skull. Water stained with phosphor cast ghastly hues on skeletal ribs. Nyra was hauled before Prince Valen in a throne room lined with serrated coral blades. He rose, composure iron slick. You disappoint me, princess. Treason on the eve of unity. Treason? Nyra spat, struggling as chains bound her wrists to a stone pillar. Your spies stalked me, attacked on foreign sand. The sand was sullied by your forbidden liaison. Valen approached, gloved hand lifting her chin. A human sailor. How quaint. Release me. When I am certain your will aligns with mine. He produced a small vial of ink-black liquid. The tether draft. It bends rebellious currents to rightful heirs. Nyra's stomach tightened. Only tyrants need such poisons. Valen's eyes flickered with cold amusement. History crowns tyrants as victors, Nyra. He uncorked the vial. Echoes of her mother's voice rose in memory. Magic obeys conviction stronger than fear. Nyra inhaled, calling every reserve. A faint luminescence seeped from her scars, racing along chains, heating metal until it groaned. Valen's brow furrowed as emerald light intensified. With a cry, Nyra shattered the cuffs and unleashed a wave of kinetic force that hurled guards across the chamber. Valen staggered but steadied, summoning a vortex of dark water. So the sorceress' blood wakes. Nyra darted toward the exit, weaving through falling rubble, but Valen's magic coiled around her ankle, slamming her to the floor. Pain dazzled white. The draft vial rolled from his fingers, cracking against stone. Midnight liquid seeped, mixing with seawater. He knelt, voice a hiss. Run again and I'll sever the sailor's breath before dawn. Nyra froze, heart galloping. You don't know where he is. Tideborne scouts observe everything that touches our waves. Your human drifts in a fishing shack. He draws breath only by my tolerance. Rage and terror clashed, leaving cold resolve. What do you want? Your public allegiance. A ceremony 3 nights hence in Abyssia's grand hall, pledging heart and magic to me. Refuse, and I deliver your sailor's corpse to your father. Nyra's throat tightened. You'll still wage war. This union is conquest masked as peace. And yet peace it will be, so long as you stand beside me. He signaled the guards. Lock her in the Leviathan keep. Let her weigh choices in silence. Chains reaffixed, Nyra was dragged into a tunnel lined with bioluminescent bones. The cell was a hollow eye socket of the ancient skull, barred with forged coral. When the guards departed, darkness pressed around her. She paced, mind burning through panic toward strategy. If Valen had spies on the surface, Elias was in mortal risk. She had 3 nights. Nyra knelt, palms on whetstone, whispering the old language her mother taught in secret. Threads of energy fluttered, weakened by the cell's warding sigils. Still, a flicker escaped, an echo cast into currents, seeking Illyra, seeking any Abyssian ally. Hours bled into uncertain quiet. Dripping water marked time. Nyra's eyelids drooped, then snapped open at a faint scrape. A slit in the wall slid aside, revealing a pair of wide, fearful eyes. Princess? The voice trembled. Pine, a young Tideborne page Nyra recognized from distant diplomatic visits. I shouldn't be here. She rose. If Valen finds you... He's speaking with War Council, I bring food. Pine slipped a shell platter through the bars. And news. Rumor says the human sailor traveled inland at dawn. A village healer took him to the cliffs. Relief warred with dread. Then he still lives. Pine nodded, glancing over his shoulder. Some of us don't want war. My sister serves in Abyssia's crystal libraries. If battles start, we'll lose kin. Compassion softened Nyra's voice. Tell me, can you open these bars? Pine swallowed. The key is in the eel guard's belt, but the moment they see escape... Not escape, she said, mind-aligning sparks. A message. She unspooled a strand of violet kelp from her hair, pouring the faint pulse of her magic into it until glyphs glimmered. Bring this to the Abyssian courier station. Find Lady Illyra. She described the maid's markings. This sigil will prove authenticity. Can you do this? Pine accepted the strand, fingers shaking. And if I'm caught? Hide until the new moon. My father honors brave hearts. You will have sanctuary. The youth swallowed and slipped away, panel sealing behind. Nyra slumped against the bars, hope fragile but alive. She pressed her forehead to cold coral. Hold on, Elias. Meanwhile, in the fishing village, Elias struggled into consciousness as dawn brushed the sky. Elder Mira, healer and keeper of sea legends, guided him to a stool outside her hut. "You've stirred with mer dreams," she rasped. "Storm saw fit to spare you, but tides aren't done." Elias flexed his partially healed shoulder. "I need to return to the cove. She may come back." "Your sea savior? Foolish to chase phantoms." Yet her eyes gleamed with curiosity. "Tell me her name." He hesitated. "Nyra." Mira's fingers twitched. "Nyra. There is an old ballad of a queen named Nereithia, called Nyra by her lover. She wed a human king, uniting their realms until jealous tides tore them apart." Elias's heartbeat quickened. Could be coincidence, or prophecy repeating. Mira waved a scarred hand. "You carry the mark of the tide-bound boy." She pointed to the faint outline on his wrist, something Elias had chalked up to childhood scar. In daylight it shimmered faintly. "When mer blood and human heart meet, ancient bonds wake." "I don't understand." "You will." She pressed a jade amulet into his palm. Within swirled, trapped seawater, glowing faintly. "This belonged to Nereithia's mortal consort. Keeps his lungs full beneath the waves. If the sea calls, you'll need breath." Elias's gaze hardened with purpose. "Then the sea it is." He packed a satchel, ignoring Mira's warnings. As gulls called overhead, he marched toward the cliff path leading down to the secret cove. Back in Leviathan Keep, Nyra's rest was shattered by the gate grinding open. Valen's guard captain entered with 2 soldiers. "Prince Valen commands your transfer to Abyssia for public recantation." Nyra steadied her breathing as shackles closed around her wrists. "And if I refuse?" "Then the prince's retribution begins with your human." Resolve flared. As they escorted her through labyrinthine corridors, she studied ward sigils etched along arches, symbols she'd seen in her mother's grimoire. With precise timing, she dragged her chains across one sigil, disrupting its glow. Sparks ignited, alarms flaring. Guards spun. Nyra unleashed a palm strike of compressed current, knocking one unconscious. She ducked a trident sweep, rolled, and seized the iron shaft. Wrenching it free, she jammed a floor grate open and plunged down an emergency drainage chute, water gushing around her. She emerged in a subterranean grotto lit by glowing magma vents. Echoes of pursuit reverberated above. Ahead, a narrow fissure led outside the fortress. She slipped through moments before soldiers arrived, their shouts echoing. Freedom tasted of iron and smoke, but she had little time. She darted into a kelp maze and summoned a school of daggerfish, directing them to scatter in false trails. Then she raced for Abyssia, lungs burning, mind fixed on Elira and Elias. Hours later, she reached the outskirts of her kingdom, slipping past patrolling seahorse cavalry. Elira awaited near a coral spire, worry etched deep. "Pine delivered your message." The maid clasped Nyra's hands, relief tremoring. "Your father knows you were taken. He holds counsel even now. But Valen sent envoys claiming you fled with a human threat. Tension is razor thin." Nyra's gaze hardened. "We've 3 nights before Valen enforces marriage or war. Where is Elias?" "Safe, I hope. He left the village at dawn. My spies lost him near the upper caves." Nyra's heart squeezed. "I must find him before Valen does." Elira nodded. "First come. The king needs truth from your lips." Nyra followed into hidden tunnels leading toward the royal quarters. Yet as they neared the throne corridor, a tremor rocked the seabed. Distant booms echoed, explosions of storm magic. Elira's eyes widened. "Valen's fleet, he's attacking already." Nyra tasted copper fear. "We're out of time." Guards rushed past with tridents, choral song horns blaring. Nyra grabbed Elira's forearm. "Find my father. Tell him I go to the surface to secure the prophecies' key. Only the union of land and sea can halt the tide of blood. But the king, he will understand when storms break overhead." Nyra inhaled, summoning armor of woven kelp and moonshell, a gift from her mother's chest. I sail both worlds. With a burst of speed, she shot upward, breaching into gathering dusk. Rolling thunderheads marched from the horizon, Valen's storm serpents coiling within. Far below, Abyssia readied for war. Far above, cliffs waited where a human with tide-bound blood searched for meaning. Nyra swam through crimson-lit waves toward the shore, heart a drum of urgency and hope, unaware that Valen himself followed in the shadow of a Leviathan war chariot, trident crackling with stolen lightning. Wind scoured salt across her cheeks as she climbed the rocky shelf, legs forming once more. She glanced back, dark shapes mustering beneath the waves. The first strike of lightning speared the water, sending pillars of steam skyward. She turned toward the cliff path where torchlight flickered. Elias, silhouetted against the storm. Determination carved his stance as he descended toward her. "Nyra!" he called over thunder. She reached him breathless. "There isn't time. Valen marches. Abyssia will fall unless we fulfill an ancient bond." He studied her, rain streaking his face. "Tell me what to do." She placed the jade amulet over his neck. It glowed, water swirling inside. "Trust the sea. Trust me." Above, lightning forked again. A colossal wave rose offshore, Valen's war front. Nyra gripped Elias's hand. "Then let's end this," he said. They faced the roaring tide together as storm winds howled, ready to step into legend. Rain hammered the cliff face, thunder reverberating through stone and bone alike. Nyra tightened her grip on Elias's hand as the storm front advanced, a towering wall of cobalt water crested by lightning and the gleam of polished armor. At the wave's heart rode Prince Valen in a spined chariot pulled by storm serpents, his trident buzzing with stolen current. Hundreds of tide-born warriors followed like the teeth of a closing maw. Elias's jade amulet pulsed against his chest, synchronizing with Nyra's racing heart. "Tell me what power I'm meant to wield," he shouted above the wind. "Your blood remembers," she answered, voice trembling with magic. "Let it rise when the sea calls." The wave crashed against the rocky terrace, water exploding into sheets that hissed across the stone. Valen stepped forward, conjuring a shimmering barrier that parted the deluge around him. His gaze found Nyra. "You flee one prison to build another. Still you run to weakness." She stepped in front of Elias. "I run toward freedom." Valen raised his trident and slammed it into the rock. A web of crackling energy burst outward, fissuring ground and sending Nyra sprawling. Elias caught her, shielding her body with his. Lightning arced from Valen's weapon, lashing the earth and igniting small fires in wind-tossed scrub. Nyra pushed herself upright, shoulder throbbing. "Your quarrel is with me. Leave the surface untouched." "The surface is bargaining chip," Valen said. "Surrender, and the humans will forget this night. Resist, and their coastlines drown." Elias stepped beside Nyra, facing Valen with calm defiance. "Seems to me the prince fears a lone sailor more than he admits." Valen's eyes narrowed, noting the amulet's glow. "A trinket does not make you a threat." Elias inhaled deeply, feeling salt and storm surge into his lungs without pain. The amulet brightened, water swirling faster. As he exhaled, mist surrounded him, then coalesced into translucent glyphs floating above his palms. Shock flickered across Valen's face. Nyra's own surprise quickly became awe. "Your line truly bore the tidal heart's blessing." Elias looked at his hands. "Feels like the sea is singing inside me." Valen's composure snapped. He swept his trident horizontally, unleashing a crescent of black water laced with lightning. Nyra thrust both palms forward, conjuring a shield of living coral that sprouted from the earth, intercepting the attack with a deafening crack. Shards flew. She staggered. Elias stepped into the breach, will focusing through the amulet. A ring of water spiraled upward from the puddles around his boots, forming into a prow-shaped spear that hardened into crystalline ice. He hurled it. The spear sliced Valen's shoulder guard, drawing a line of violet blood. The prince snarled, pain warped into fury. Enough! At his command, storm serpents lunged, jaws glowing with electric venom. Nyra chanted ancient syllables. Tide spirits rose from the waves, luminous silhouettes wielding currents like ribbons. Wind howled as serpent lightning clashed against swirling water shields. Elias dodged a snapping maw, landing beside Nyra. "Any plan?" he asked, heart pounding. "Break the trident," she said. "It focuses his stolen magic. You get me close, I'll finish it." They moved as one. Nyra vaulted toward the battlefield, conjuring a whirlpool column that carried them over surging water. Valen turned, eyes lit with cold suspicion. Nyra released Elias mid-arc. He somersaulted over the prince. When his boots struck whetstone, he rolled and grabbed the trident's haft. Electricity jolted his arms, but he tightened his grip, remembering the rhythm of the ocean inside him. Valen roared, twisting to yank the weapon free, but Nyra slammed both hands onto the trident's head and channeled her mother's starfire spell. Golden cracks splintered along the current steel. Elias added his strength, calling seawater to flood into the fissures. With a resounding snap, the trident shattered. A sonic shockwave rippled outward. Storm serpents convulsed and dispersed into harmless vapor. Tide-born warriors froze, confusion eroding their battle fervor. Lightning above stuttered and died, leaving only rolling thunder. Valen stumbled back, gaze flicking from the ruined haft to Nyra's blazing eyes. "You doom us all," he hissed. "Without dominion, chaos will reign." "Dominion breeds only fear," Nyra replied. "Let the sea choose cooperation." Valen's expression hardened to desperate resolve. He drew a blade of obsidian coral and lunged. Elias stepped between, parrying with an ice-forged dagger conjured on instinct. Sparks of frost and ember sprayed. Valen's superior training forced Elias down to one knee, blade inching toward his throat. Nyra shouted and summoned a tidal surge that rose behind Valen. The wall of water took the form of a massive hand, seizing the prince and hurling him across the rocks. He collided with a barnacled pillar, weapon skittering away. Panting, Elias straightened. "You keep saving me." "Likewise," she breathed. Valen pushed to his feet, drenched, armor cracked. "This is not over." He raised both hands, chanting a forbidden invocation. The sky churned, opening a whirlpool of cloud that threatened to drag the sea itself upward. Energy crackled around him, feeding on rage. Nyra's hair whipped about her face in gale force. "He's drawing on raw chaos," she shouted to Elias. "We have to seal it." "How?" She grasped his hand, pressing it to her heart. "Together. Lend me your tide-bound spark." He closed his eyes, feeling her heartbeat merge with his. Ocean and shore dissolving into a single vast pulse. Magic rose through them with unstoppable tide, spiraling into a pillar of turquoise light that shot skyward. The storm's vortex faltered, fractures of gold cutting through black cloud. Valen screamed defiance, forced to his knees by the pressure of converging currents. Water ribbons bound his limbs, tightening with each thrash. Nyra stepped forward. "Yield, Valen, and you may yet serve peace." His laugh was brittle as splintered shell. "I yield to nothing." With a final effort, he drew a concealed dagger and slashed the bonds, diving toward her. Elias intercepted, gripping the prince's wrist. They struggled atop the slippery rock. Valen head-butted Elias, driving him backward toward a sheer drop. Nyra's pulse hammered as she cast a lash of water, knocking Valen off balance. The prince slipped, but instead of falling, he wrenched Elias with him. They plunged over the edge toward the churning surf. Nyra's cry tore free. She leapt. Cold engulfed her as she arrowed downward, tail forming mid-descent. Below, Elias and Valen tumbled through dark water, bubbles streaming around them. Valen had lost his dagger. He clawed at Elias's throat with bare hands. Elias braced an arm across the prince's neck, but his human strength waned. Nyra darted in, gripping Valen's shoulder. Her magic blazed, searing hot against his battered armor. He spun, eyes wide with almost reverent disbelief. "You would kill a prince for a human? I would save a kingdom from a tyrant." She thrust both palms into his chest, unleashing a pulse of compressed tide energy. The shockwave hurled Valen deeper into the trench. Bioluminescent shadows swallowed him as whale-sized currents rolled overhead. Chains of living kelp shot after him, conjured by Nyra's command, binding him in organic prison far below. She turned to Elias, hooking an arm around his waist. The amulet's glow brightened, and he inhaled water without choking, eyes round with wonder. Together they ascended in a spiral of swirling light, breaking the surface amid receding storm clouds. On the cliffs, Tideborn and Abyssian forces faced off but hesitated as the storm dissipated. King Thandros rode the current on a conch-drawn chariot, trident ready. His fierce gaze softened when Nyra emerged, supporting Elias. He swam forward. "My daughter," he said, voice thick with awe and grief. "Rumor said you were taken." "Valen's ambition forced my hand, father. But his reign ends below, bound by kelp and judgment." Thandros eyed Elias, noting the amulet's shine. "And who is this mortal?" Elias met the king's gaze, unflinching. "Elias Grey, captain of the Ardent, descendant of the tide-bound oath. I stand with Nyra." The king's trident dipped slightly. "Legend speaks of a unity once forged between land and sea. I dismissed it as children's lore." Nyra clasped Elias's fingers. "It lives, father. Our magic together broke Valen's storm. Imagine what harmony could heal." Diplomats and generals gathered, murmuring. Thandros surveyed the wounded soldiers, the fractured alliances, the hush that followed the tempest. At last he spoke. "Abyssia will not marry peace to tyranny, nor will we bind my daughter to a cage. If the prophecy chooses her path, I will not stand against the sea's will." Tideborn warriors laid down arms, leaderless without Valen. Some bowed in surrender, others in respect. The storm front dispersed entirely, revealing a dawn streaking the horizon in rose and gold. Nyra's shoulders sagged with relief. She glanced at Elias, who smiled despite exhaustion. "Looks like the doorway stayed open," he whispered. She laughed softly. "And we just walked through." That afternoon, under calm waves, Abyssian healers tended wounded from both sides. Nyra and Elias stood before the coral throne in the grand hall, where their betrothal to Valen had once been proclaimed. This time, the audience wore expressions of cautious hope rather than rigid expectation. King Thandros addressed the assembly. "Today I witnessed power born not of conquest, but of shared purpose. Princess Nyra saved us by uniting Abyssian sorcery with the legacy of the surface. Therefore I decree a new accord, the tidal concord, binding Abyssia to the tide-bound lineage through faith and cooperation, not chains." Applause rippled through the hall like gentle surf. Elira wiped tears, flashing Nyra an elated grin. Thandros turned to Elias. "Captain Grey, will you accept stewardship of this alliance, standing alongside my daughter as guardian of both realms?" Elias bowed, steady despite sleepless nights and bruises. "With honor." Nyra felt the weight of eyes upon her, yet no pressure, only warmth. She stepped forward. "Let the first mandate of the Concord be to free oppressed waters and invite exchange. No more fear of sky or sea." Cheers swelled, echoing across coral walls. Banners unfurled depicting intertwined waves and gull wings. A new sigil. Later, in the quiet of the sea gardens, Nyra and Elias drifted among gently waving fronds. Bioluminescent buds ignited as they passed, painting them in soft azure. Elias exhaled, bubbles rising. "You once called the surface a doorway. Seems we built a bridge instead." "A bridge strong enough to bear two worlds," she agreed. He brushed back a silver strand from her face. "And us?" She smiled, placing his palm to her heart again. "We are the tide that binds, ever shifting, always returning." He leaned in. Their lips met, gentle as the first ripple across a still sea, then deepened into a promise carried by currents and wind alike. Around them, tide spirits flickered in joyous constellations, and somewhere far below, the tidal heart pulsed in rhythm with their own. On the horizon, dawn's glow heralded a future uncharted, but for the first time in centuries, both sea and sky greeted it together. Nyra rested her forehead to Elias's. "We were never made to stay divided." "And now," he whispered, "we never will be." Beyond the coral arches, Abyssia's towers glittered beside anchored surface ships bearing pennants of peace, their reflections mingling in the calm water, a mirrored testament to a world reborn beneath the crown.